Okay,
And I'm muting myself, so that improves the sound quality. So if we mute, we can hear the chair and pay attention.
okay, I'm opening the meeting of the planning board on July 14th. Charlotte Harris, Vice President, sitting in for Pat Kerfoot, who's away tonight. And we'll begin with reading the governor's notice about virtual meetings. Paul, if you would please read that.
In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, the July 14th, 2020 public meeting of the Falmouth Planning Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Alternative public access to the meeting shall be provided in the following manner. Will be televised via real-time public comment can be addressed to the planning board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. This application will allow users to view the meeting and send a comment or question to the chair via the chat function. Submitted text comments will be read into the record at the appropriate points in the meeting. Zoom login instructions. The following web address, www.falmouthmass.us/11/planning board. 3, additional public comments may be sent in advance of the meeting to planning@falmouthma.gov at least 5 hours prior to the beginning of the meeting. Documents and audio or video files may be submitted by email. Submitted email comments and documents will be made part of the meeting record and may be read into the record, summarized or displays during the meeting at the discretion of the chair. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement remotely. Physically present. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement matters before the planning board may contact the planning department to arrange an alternative means of real-time participation if unable to use the Zoom virtual meeting software. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting to planning@falmouthma.gov so that they may be displayed for remote public access viewing.
Okay, so as much as possible, the Zoom meeting tries to follow the rules of our normal meetings. And I see that we have 8 attendees who are in the waiting room and will be brought in by Thomas Cox, the town IT person, when their issue comes forward for discussion. So they won't be evident until it's time for them to participate. I hope we all are clearly understanding that. The minutes, Paul. Tom?
If I may, just for a moment, Madam Chair, I wanted to report, we checked and there have been no emails sent prior to the meeting. So any correspondence with the board, any discussion with the board will be through the chat function. There were no emails received prior to the deadline for the meeting today.
Thank you. Paul?
He's
Paul,
muted.
you're muted. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I recommend approval of the minutes of the meeting of June 2nd, June 23rd, and June 30th, as well as the minutes of the June 9th meeting that was aborted. That is the draft minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Any
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, the first item of business that we have on our agenda tonight is an approval not required plan.
Ready.
Yep,
Done.
excuse me? Were there notices, Paul? Muted again.
No notices for an A&R plan, ma'am.
Okay, the applicant is Robert Fallon, a plan of land to reconfigure the lot lines between 2 existing lots located on Little Island Road, map numbers 14, 019, 017A, and 017B, BS and B design. I think that should come up on the screen now so that the public and we can see the lot lines that we're talking about.
Okay, Michaela, you've got
Yep.
the screen share. Thank you.
Yep, give me just
Yeah.
1 moment. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
That's okay. Did everyone on the board have a chance to go through the materials? Thank you, Tom, for delivering them to our houses. That's really helpful.
Well, we typically drop them in the mail, but this week Melinda was under the weather on that day. We usually get those things done. So that's why you got a flurry of emails rather than one nicely packaged package from Melinda, and why I menaced your yard dropping off packages for the planning board.
It took me a little while to realize that they were there, but I have them now. Okay, that's clear on the screen. Is there any question about about what's being asked?
Nope, it's pretty
No.
clear.
Clear.
Any board member have a comment on it? On the issue? It meets the requirements, it's on a public way, it has the frontage.
It has everything we expect for an A&R.
Yes, it does. Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion then to endorse.
So move.
Would you like me to read a motion?
Yes,
Okay, move to endorse Robert Fallon plan of land to reconfigure the lot lines between two existing lots located on Little Island Road, map numbers 14, 019, 017A, and 017B, without regard to zoning or buildability, and should not be construed as an approval with the light shown are entitled
lot
to
shown.
with the light.
No, it's a typo, it's lot shown.
Oh, with the,
I have fat fingers and I don't speak very well when I'm dictating.
with the lots shown are entitled to a building permit. So,
Is there a second? I don't think we got a second.
I moved it.
Yeah, it's been moved.
I'll second.
Okay, good, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our next piece of business is much more complicated. Not really, it's just for a decision. We have a decision on it, we've seen this. The applicant is Timothy Leadham, trustee of RNG Realty Trust, for a special permit application to allow parking in the front yard located at 1209 East Falmouth Highway. Cape and Islands Engineering are the ones who presented it. I believe that we have a decision here. And Bob, could you read that?
Okay. Motion that the planning board vote to approve the application of Timothy Leadham, trustee of RNG Realty Trust under Article 22, parking requirements, and grant a special permit pursuant to section 240-109E of the zoning bylaws to construct parking in the front yard of the premises located at 1209 East Falmouth Highway, Falmouth, as shown on Assessors Map 32, Section 11, Parcel 001C, Lot 000, as depicted on the plans entitled Site Layout Plan prepared by RNG Realty Trust. I already read that, East Falmouth, Massachusetts. Prepared by Cape and Islands Engineering, dated January 29, 2020, with latest revisions March 6, 2020, scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet, along with the landscape plan entitled Site Plan. Landscape plan prepared by, is it the same? Okay. I'm having trouble going down the, following my line of sight here. Prepared by RNG Realty Trust, 1209 East Falmouth Highway, East Falmouth, Massachusetts. Prepared by Cape and Islands Engineering, dated 2029, scale of 1 inch equals 20 feet, and existing conditions and demolition plan dated January 29th, 2020, scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet. A signed letter from Building Commissioner Rod Palmer regarding setbacks dated March 9th, 2020, with the following findings. The applicant, Timothy Leadham, trustee of R&G Realty Trust, is applying to the planning board for a special permit under section 240-109E for parking in the front yard of the premises. The applicant is proposing to raise the existing building and construct a new proposed 6,000 square foot building. The use of the site remains the same and the number of slips will stay the same. The parcel is located in the Marine District in the Coit Bay Coastal Pond Overlay. The existing lot coverage by structure is 32%, and the project is proposing to reduce that to 7%. The allowed maximum is 40%. Existing lot coverage by structures, parking, and pavement is 80%, and the project is proposing to reduce that to 68%. The allowed maximum amount is 70%. The proposed structure will be set 129 feet from White's Landing Road, which meets the required front yard setback of 25 feet, and will be 31 feet from East Falmouth Highway. The special permit granting authority shall grant a special permit only upon its written determination that proposed use will not have adverse effects which overbalance its beneficial effects on either the neighborhood or the town in view of the particular characteristics of the site. Findings specific to 240-109E of the zoning bylaw. Prohibited parking area. No part of any private parking area having 5 or more parking spaces shall be located within a front yard as defined in Article 3 definition. Nor shall any private parking area be located within 5 feet of any property line. Planning board may, by special permit, allow parking in front yards or within 5 feet of a property line. Parking areas for marine and business use shall be at least 15 feet from the property line of any existing residential district or use. No part of any private parking area serving a non-residential use shall be located in or interfere with any area utilized for off-street loading or unloading of materials or merchandise, including but not limited to gasoline dispensing or storage facilities, loading docks, or stacking areas for drive-through windows. Findings specific to 240-216 of the zoning bylaw. 1, adequacy of the site in terms of size for the proposed use. 2, suitability of the site for the proposed use. 3, impact on traffic flow and safety. 4, impact on neighborhood visual character, including views and vistas. 5, adequacy of method of sewage disposal, source of water and drainage. 6, adequacy of utilities and other public services. 7, the effect of the proposed project on the adequacy of the supply of affordable housing in the town. There is none. Therefore, given the above and the conditions to be imposed below, the planning board finds the application special permit proposed to allow for parking in the front yard will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter, and that the proposal will not have adverse effects which overbalance its beneficial effects on either the neighborhood or the town. Conditions. The plan, 1, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes shall be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary. Pursuant to section 240-183B of the zoning bylaw, no permit for occupancy of the new construction shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied that the conditions of this approval have been met. 2, pursuant to section 240-221 of the zoning bylaw, the special permit shall lapse 3 years from the date it is granted if a substantial use thereof has not sooner commenced except for a good cause. 3, the applicant will receive final approval by engineering prior to starting construction.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there any further discussion? Paul? Paul, did you raise your hand? You have to unmute yourself.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? No, Paul, John? You have to unmute
You
yourself.
have to move it.
You have to move it first. John, you need to unmute yourself. Pam, could you move the book?
Yes, I move that we approve the Timothy Latham application before the planning board special permit for parking in the front yard of the premises.
Thank you. Now, Paul,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. It's approved. Moving on.
Question.
Next, we have a matter for public discussion.
Madam Chair,
Paul, yeah,
I understand we need to take a roll call vote on all these votes nowadays.
do we?
Correct, Mr. Bott?
Please, that is the preferred method while we're doing a Zoom meeting, is to take a roll call vote on these things. Thanks, Paul. I
So
was
we
trying
should
to
do a
find
roll
my-
call vote on this.
All right, then, I'm going to take you in the order that I see you on the screen. Jim,
Aye.
John? You have to unmute yourself, John.
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Paul,
Raya, aye.
and Charlotte, aye. Okay, now we have voted. Now, a matter for public discussion. The applicant, we have seen this before because we amended the solar district in order to allow this, so we're familiar with it. The applicant is SCS Nathan Ellens, 011282 Falmouth West LLC, SCS Nathan Ellis, 011282 Falmouth East LLC, and it's seeking a site plan review to construct a large-scale ground-mounted solar carport facility in the overlay district. I think this is the time that, yeah, we should be having quite a few people coming in from the waiting room who have come to speak to this issue.
Madam
Tom.
Chair? Yes, we do have both Rennie and Max who are presenting on behalf of the Lawrenceville Fairgrounds and the solar project. So they've been elevated and they are ready. And if you would like, I'd be happy to give you a brief thumbnail of what we're looking at tonight before the gentlemen get into their presentation.
Would you please?
Yes. So this project at the, and I'm having a little hard time with some background noise there. So this project requires site plan approval from the planning board within the solar overlay district. The fairgrounds are the second application the town has received and presents the first expansion of the large-scale ground-mounted solar PV overlay district voted at town meeting. The area is currently used for parking events at the fairgrounds. There are no existing structures and essentially no trees to be cleared. And since these panels are not mounted on existing structures, they are, in the opinion of the town staff, ground-mounted with enough clearance under the arrays to park vehicles. There is a lot of upside for the fairgrounds, for their patrons who now park under the shade, for the environment, and for the town of Falmouth. Initial conversations with Jesse Zvala and Wendy Brown of the Barnstable County Fairgrounds and TRC, the solar folks, began around February 2019. We've continued to have meetings and discussions in-house, which led to the first amendment to the solar overlay district. Because when we started this wasn't a district that was perceived for this. They were hoping to get an accessory use. But as you know, the building commissioners determined that an accessory use for solar, you can't put out more juice than you use on the site. And that just wasn't possible at this site. So we amended, town meeting amended the site under the solar overlay district to allow for this use with the planning board's approval, site plan approval. For the most part, the applicants have done a good job with pre-filing meetings, scaling back the project and working through some of the issues with registered land that includes part of the property for the solar arrays. Now, typically when we look at something like this and a lot doesn't conform, in this case, there were several lots that were smaller than 7 acres. We would typically tell the applicant, just do an A&R plan and combine those lots. But as it turns out with registered land, it is particularly difficult, complex, and expensive to do so. So in conversations with their council, with town council, we have entered into, or we have a covenant that's been prepared to take those undersized parcels and essentially use them as one parcel. Those 7 lots out of those 1 smaller lots include lot 1802003, 18002-185, 1802002-184, and 1802004 to achieve that minimum 7-acre parcel. The covenant effectively creates a corner lot with frontage on Nathan Ellis. And under our zoning bylaw, the applicant is allowed to determine which of the frontages on their property is the front yard. And in this case, they have selected Nathan Ellis. Ashumet is considered a side yard setback, hence the 35-foot setback you see on Ashumet along the road. because of the existence of fairy shrimp, and I don't want to steal Rennie's thunder to talk about the fairy shrimp because I know he's very excited to talk about this. These are these depressions that these critters live in, and they don't quite meet the requirements of the Conservation Commission, but they are precious to someone in the state who asked them to preserve them. So there's been some adjusting of the setbacks on these panels on the further northern side along Ashumet. There is one incorrect note regarding the setbacks in the staff report that we noted about the rear setbacks on Courier Road. Once again, the applicants will discuss that, showing that 35 setback, which is likely supposed to be a 100-foot setback. I have spoken with the developer. We talked about this today. They haven't had a chance to put together a presentation specifically on that, but they are prepared to address the board, tell them what's going on, take your questions, and take our feedback as they have throughout the project. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for that. Mr. Friedman, do you wish to go first, or who is speaking for the project first?
I'll go first, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. And is there a way I can share my screen? So I have a little presentation.
That's good. I heard that you were going to be able to do that.
Oh, there's a green button right here. Let me see.
Yep, right down at the bottom, Rennie. Share screen.
Yeah. Can everybody see try this. The presentation?
Yes, you should be seeing what we're seeing.
Excellent. So I just want to make sure everyone can see that the opening screen. It just says Falmouth Planning Board and today's date. Everybody good there?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so
Friedman,
much.
could you introduce yourself first so that we know?
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely, absolutely. So as mentioned, Rennie Friedman, the Director of Project Development for Sol Systems. Sol Systems is a national solar developer and financier. We develop, finance, own and maintain various solar assets throughout the US. The group I work with, we specifically focus on, excuse me, C&I, or commercial and industrial solar uses. So bigger than residential, but smaller than the massive 1,000 acres projects you see more in the Southwest. So projects like this are right in our wheelhouse. This is what we do. So thank you very much for having me tonight and allowing me to present to you. This was, just as a side note, signing on and being able to share my screen was remarkably easy, and I'm not very good at this kind of stuff, so I really do appreciate how smooth this is going so far. Just for a bit of background, I won't take too much time on this because, as I know you mentioned previously, we did come for the board last year to get the solar overlay zone amended to encompass this site. So just wanted to do a brief background. Again, this project is going to be a solar carport project at the Cape Cod Fairgrounds. As many of you may know, that the fairgrounds is actually owned and operated by the Barnstable County Agricultural Society, a nonprofit organization founded in 1844 with a focus on charity and education. How this project came to be is the BCAS commissioned the Cape Cod Commission to do an investigation into the fairgrounds back in 2014 to identify opportunities to enhance the fairground viability and character, encourage on-site improvements that are consistent with local regulations and community character. Part of that report found that the parking lots lack appropriate organization in order to maximize the parking area's capabilities. And additionally, the report stated that the fairgrounds may want to investigate the viability of solar panels over some of the parking areas. So that report was done back in 2014, and Sol Systems was awarded the project as a solar developer in 2018. And that was handled via an RFP process. We are very excited about this project and very happy to be presenting in front of you tonight. This is a very unique project. We'll get into some of the reasons why, but what we're doing here is proposing to put solar carports over the existing parking lots at the county fairgrounds. What's great is that there will be no impacts to public services, so there's no additional needs for schools, water, sewer, traffic, emergency services. So it's really great in that regard. In addition, because these are parking lots, the lots are already cleared. There's very, very minimal clearing of trees that will be required for this project. It might actually be zero. I just don't want to commit to that right now. There's one tiny area that we might have to clear a tree or two, but very, very minimal clearing of trees. In addition, we're not proposing any new asphalt paving. We have based these carport layouts off of engineered parking lot plans. This is a pretty unique situation in that typically where you see a solar carport, such as Kenyon's, there's an existing parking lot, and it's pretty clear where you should put the I-beams and the foundations and how it should orient itself, because it has to cover the parking that's there. However, here we effectively have open fields. And what we wanted to do is make sure that when we install these carports, that the parking lots will still function as parking lots. So we've, TRC, who is our engineer for this project, has spent a lot of time and effort coming up with very detailed engineered parking lot plans. And I believe the report put together by staff notes that as well, that the parking spaces meet code, the drive aisles meet code also. We're going to be installing pervious gravel underneath all of the solar panels underneath the carports. This is something that we've been investigating quite heavily over the last number of months. It was additionally brought up several times at the end of last year when we were here for the solar overlay zone work. And we wanted to make sure that, of course, we're not going to create a big mud pit. We spent a lot of time and energy thinking and analyzing the best solution for this. And really what it came down to is putting pervious gravel under the carports will still allow the rainwater that will get to it. It will infiltrate into the soil, just like it currently is done. However, we'll make sure that the site will not turn into a mud pit. There will be no soil leaving the site. And what's great is that the large grass areas all around the solar carports can stay as large grass areas. And as many folks are aware, solar overlay amendment was passed at last year's town meeting. So here's an aerial image of the county fairgrounds. Really, there's kind of 4 sub areas highlighted in red there. We kind of effectively refer to them as Barnstable West and Barnstable East. We're not very good when we name our projects, so that's about as creative as we could get. So West is the 2 larger red blocks on the west side of the screen, both north and south of the highway. East is, of course, on the right side of your screen, on the east and west side of Ashumet Rd there. I did want to point out a clarification in the staff report. Staff correctly identified that some of the appendices might have had perhaps an old plan included. So I just wanted to clarify, there was a note in the staff report that was questioning whether Site 1 and Site 4, shown in Exhibit A and Appendix B, or an area for a transformer switch for Barnstable East in Appendix H. Those are not part of the project, and there is no plan right now to have those be a future project. Actually, Site 1 is what we call Lot 2. That is the lot. You can kind of see a part of it. It's in the very southeast corner of your screen. It's on the south side of the highway, just south of Ashumet Rd over there. That's what's called Lot 2. It's a very long, thin parking lot. It is also a parking lot used by the fairgrounds. And as Mr. Bott mentioned, we had originally at one point thought about including that in the request for the solar overlay zone expansion. But in meeting with the community and meeting with the town, we decided that was not in the best interest. And that is in a residential area over there. So we decided to scale the project back and to not include that. So here is an overall layout plan. Again, it's the same general image as the aerial image. You can see where those 4 kind of sub areas are. And this should be in the hard copy of the plans that you have as well. So what you're looking at here, everything in blue that you see is a solar panel. It's a little difficult to see from this area vantage point. And I apologize, I can't really zoom in, but you can kind of see some pink in between some of the blue. That is the pervious gravel that will be underneath the panels. And then you can see the green, which will remain as grass. So quite a lot of areas that are going to remain as grass. It's grass currently. We see no reason why that should not remain as grass going forward. So wanted to, again, clarify just a couple things that the staff report talked about and brought up. One of them is on Ashumet Rd. So again, I'll go back a slide real quick. I'll actually go back 2 slides. So the area we're going to focus in on next is what we call Barnstable East. It's the 2 smaller red blocks over on the right side of the screen. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in there. So here we are zoomed in. You can see there's Ashumet Rd that kind of runs north-south there. Currently, there are parking lots on both the west and east side of Ashumet Rd. You can see in blue where the existing entrances to those parking lots are. We are proposing to keep the entrance on the west side of the road as it is currently shown, but the plans currently have the entrance on the east side of the road being shifted just a little bit north to where the red driveway is shown. That was done to try to help the flow of traffic both into these parking lots and around these parking lots. And we're also proposing to install a new crosswalk that will help people safely walk from the eastern parking lot across Ashumet Rd towards one of the main entrances into the fairgrounds. So this is just a schematic on an aerial. And here you can see what that zoomed up version looks like. This is actually a good way to see what I was referring to before with the blue being the solar panels. You can see the pink is the gravel, and you can really see the amount of green, the amount of grass that is going to be there as well. So when you're looking here, you can see the striped crosswalk across Ashumet Rd, and you can see towards the northern side, that is going to be the proposed entrance into the eastern parking lot in this area. One other very important note that I wanted to point out here that Mr. Bott brought up is the configuration of the northern canopy area on the east side of Ashumet Rd. So as part of our consultation with the Massachusetts Natural Heritage Program, a state threatened and endangered item was identified, the Agassiz clam shrimp. And there were 3 locations that were identified just east of Ashumet Rd. They are highlighted on this exhibit in the cloud. And you can see the 3 locations are the 3 little red dots. And they each have a circle drawn around it. It might almost look like a tree with a red dot being the center of the tree. Again, the red dots are the locations where those clam shrimp were found. And through extensive work in coordination with the Massachusetts Natural Heritage Program, we've reached an agreement where as long as we do not place panels over the circles there, so I believe it's a 15-foot setback all the way around it, we are good. And we have confirmed that with them. Given this area is currently a parking lot and it will continue to function as a parking lot, they are fine with having cars drive over these areas, but they didn't want any sort of permanent or semi-permanent cover over them to affect the amount of natural rainwater and sunlight that these puddles might get. So having to avoid those 3 areas required us to push that array slightly east. So as Mr. Bott referred to earlier, the required setback from Ashumet Rd is 35 feet. But in this area, we have a 78-foot setback off of Ashumet Rd, again, solely to avoid these clam shrimp. What that's done is on the east side of the array, it moves the edge of the panels to, at the nearest point, 75 feet from the adjacent property line. I do want to point out, and you can see this, you probably can't read the 78 and the 75 foot, but those are the dimensions that are highlighted in the clouds here. So I did want to point out as well, as you can see, this is only applicable to the northern part of this array. You can see it's kind of broken up into two. The southern part meets all of the setbacks, but again, it's only applicable to the northern part. And even on that, it's only applicable to part of it. As you move further north, the property line gets further away from the panels. And by the time you reach the very north end of the array, it is fully 100 feet away from the panels. So a couple of other points about this particular area. When we're talking about the setback, the 75-foot setback, that is to the cantilevered panels. So just the edge of the panels. The foundations and supporting I-beams that run vertical that will hold the canopy up, those are 100 feet away from the property line. It's a little tough to see on this exhibit. There's little pink circles that denote where the foundations are. If you have hard copies of the plans, I think they should be in color. It might be a little bit easier to see it there.
Mhm.
But again, for this area, it's just the cantilever panels, not the foundations. And just like all the other areas where we're proposing carports here, this area the entire area is currently used as parking when the fairground has their events going on. We're not proposing any tree clearing to install these canopies. The only area on the whole project where we might have to clear a tree or two is at that new entrance into this parking area. And again, that would only be a very minimal amount of clearing, and we're doing it to help traffic purposes. So we're not clearing any trees in this area to install the canopies themselves. Additionally, we have coordinated with some of the folks that live just over that property line, and we're going to be installing a 6-foot high fence, again, just to help more clearly define where the limits of the property are and provide a little bit of privacy as well. There is quite an extensive existing tree line there as well. So on this exhibit, you can see on the left side of the screen is the site plan that we were just looking at on the previous slide. On the right side of the screen is that same site plan. It's just overlaid onto an aerial image, so you can see where those homes fall, and you can see that there is a pretty substantial existing tree line there as well. And we're not going to be impacting that tree line at all. You can even see that we've modified the parking plan to make sure that we don't have to clear any trees over on that east side there. So those were just some general project overview. I wanted to clarify a couple things in the staff report. As Mr. Bott had mentioned previously, I do know that there's one other setback that probably warrants further conversation. Again, apologies, I didn't have time to adequately wrap that into the presentation, but I do want to talk about that real quick. Might be a little hard to orient everybody, but I'll do my best. So over on the, you know what, I'm gonna call an audible. I have Google Earth pulled up. Let's just do that. Can everyone see the Google Earth image here?
Mhm.
Great. So the other area in question is the RV lot, which is here in the southwest part of your screen. And the setback in question is in regards to this church that's over here on the eastern side. You can see that the church has parking that effectively runs just about the entire length of the property line here. So we have shown on our plans that this is a 35-foot setback. I believe Mr. Bott mentioned that this should be a 100-foot setback. We have reached out to the church to see if they would be in support of a reduced setback here. They said they would be. We can certainly get that more formalized. But the fairgrounds and the church have a very good relationship over the years. The fairgrounds even granted an easement to the church, so that they can use this area for some overflow parking. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see the church actually has solar panels on its roof. So not that that really has any bearing on our project, but as a solar developer, I'm always happy to see that also. So that was the one area that Mr. Bott mentioned that I didn't have time to incorporate into the presentation, but I did want to make sure that I got a chance to bring it. So with that, that's really the presentation that I had. Again, Max Lamson with TRC, who's our engineer in this project, is here with me as well. And we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
We may be asking you to go back to the shared screen with these questions. So it's time for the board to ask their questions. Pam?
Yes, I'm concerned about, will there be any glare that could affect any of the residents from the solar array?
No, there won't be. There's enough existing tree line. And let me share my screen because I have Google Earth pulled up, and it really paints a nice picture. So there's a lot. So the existing residences are really only right along this eastern property line. This was the one that I talked about further, where the clam shrimp are. So if I zoom in here, you can see there's a pretty dense existing tree line here. And again, it's really only these couple homes that are even anywhere close. Once you get further south, they start getting further back and there's even more trees. The other thing, you can see this in the present, pull up the site plan, this a little bit better. Pull up a site plan here. So in this area, all of the panels face south.
Okay.
So all of the panels face south, so the panels do not face the homes either. So they will not see any glare.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Paul?
Mr. Freeman, thank you for your presentation. I'm very much in favor of this project, and I also like the small elements, like the educational aspect of it. I thought that was very, very well done. But I have three minor questions, and I thought I'd ask you if you could comment on them, please.
Sure.
You say there's no increase in parking. Will there be a decrease in parking with these structures?
So we don't believe so. And the reason I phrase my answer like that is because there's no set parking lines out there, it's very difficult to be able to calculate how many cars could you fit there now. What I will say though is that when you do carport applications where there is a defined parking lot at Kenny's, you generally don't lose parking spaces. You're able to incorporate it in the existing parking footprint, and you don't lose parking spaces. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to spend so much time doing the detailed engineering plans for the parking lot itself. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just trying to cram in as much solar as we could, but it wouldn't function as a usable parking. So I do not believe there will be any change in the parking.
Thank you. One other second question is, you mentioned the accessory structures are going to be located within each parcel at a distance from houses to eliminate noise. What kind of noise are you anticipating from some of the accessory structures?
So the noise from a solar project is very, very small, very, very minimal. The panels themselves make no noise at all. When the sun's shining, the panels don't make noise. The only things that make a little bit of noise are the inverters and the battery storage. It's a very low level of noise. It's kind of like a low hum. Again, they only are making noise when they're operational, so when the sun is shining. And I can show you where those are going. So we have 3 separate areas for them. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Let me do that real quick. Apologies. Right. So one, I'm going to zoom in here on the northwest area. It's going to be a pad that's right down here. And again, that's set back from the road, and there's no homes in this area. The other one is just across the highway. It's right here. Again, there's no homes close to this area as well. And the third one, I'm going to zoom over here to the east a little bit, is right here. So we made special care to put it on the west side of Ashumet Road. Again, this is at least 200, 250 feet from any of these houses. But we want to make sure we put it on the west side of the road to be as far away from any homes as possible.
Thank you. Final question. You spent a lot of time talking about stormwater, and these panels obviously are impervious, but you do mention that there's openings between the panels. And then there's a mention of shallow detention panels, but there's no indication where they are, or how often they're going to be built, or what extent they're going to be there. Would they be interfering with parking areas as well? I know
No,
that's stormwater standards, but what's the extent of these shallow detention ponds?
yeah, no, that is an excellent question. So I didn't include it in the presentation, but it is part of the site plan. If you have the site plan, the hard copies in front of you, sheet C 3.00. You know what? Let me share my screen again. Sorry, I keep forgetting that I'm not sharing my screen, and I have some good stuff. Okay. So what you're looking at now is sheet C 3.00 of the site plan that we sent in. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the equipment pads, where I kind of zoom in to show you where some of these shallow detention facilities are being placed. So I'll start here on the northwest, and it's actually right here where my little hand cursor is. So it's outside of where the parking areas are, so there'll be no impact there. Going on the south side of the highway, you can see that these are where the facilities are going here. So it's all along this kind of eastern buffer area, and here it does expand. Some of the minor earthwork we have to do does expand back, but the areas itself are all outside of the parking areas. So if you zoom in, you can see that the panels stop here at the blue, the pervious gravel is the pink, and then this is the shallow detention area. So here on this part of the project, all of the stormwater drains generally this way from west to east. So of course you want to put your ponds at the low point so that the water can collect there. And then I'll zoom over here to the east side of the project. Here it's a bit smaller, but if I zoom in, you can see that there's two. There's kind of one right here in the corner, and then another one on the other side of Ashumet Road in the corner as well. So outside of the parking areas, there are cases where it might be in a drive aisle, but again, not in a park.
Thank you.
The board members, Bob.
Yes, currently, how is the lot lighted? Is it with the light towers?
So there are existing kind of like wooden poles,
Right.
with lights out there.
Mm-hmm. And I read in the packet that we got that there will be lighting underneath the solar canopies. So does that
Correct.
replace the light towers, or will it be in addition to the light towers?
That's a great question. No, that will fully replace the light towers that are out there now. And it is under canopy lighting, so those lights will be pointed and focused downward. So the light's not going to be going into the neighbor's property, and they'll be able to be controlled from the office of the fairgrounds. So they're only going to turn them on when they need to, when there's cars there, when there's parking there, which will have the added benefit of not needing to be on all the time. But also when there are cars there, it'll be a very well lit and safe parking.
When I saw that, I thought it was a nice improvement.
Oh, thank you.
And the other question I have is there were some engineering things that I think are fairly minor. Have they been addressed? Some of it is addressed to us about changing the name. The Department of Public Works Engineering should be replaced with Planning Board. So there's just little things like that, and then the soil erosion and sediment control standard conditions, about waiving them. Has that been discussed with either the town planner or with the engineering department?
Tom, feel free to hop in here. We have not talked those yet at length. We have received the comments and gone through them. I do agree. I think some of them were actually maybe decisions for the board to make. But the other comments that we saw, and Max, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't seem to pose any issues to us.
Yeah, they were fairly minor. One was a crosswalk, having to pull a permit for a crosswalk and things
Right.
like that. So, yeah. No, it looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim,
Yeah, I have a couple questions, I think, for you, Tom. One, I haven't heard, are these things considered structure? And I was wondering, and I didn't hear anything talk about lot coverage ratios with structure and parking. It seems like that hasn't been brought up at all. And normally when we see a plan that it comports with zoning, it shows what the requirements are. Are these things structures? That's yes or no. And I thought I read in the plan that they were determined to be structures. Go ahead, you can answer that.
Sure. Sorry, I got a sticky mouse. I was just trying to get to the unmute button. As you know, we've had a number of conversations about what the zoning building commissioner considers structures. And until we get it fixed, these are not considered structures.
Okay.
Under
So then lot coverage ratio doesn't matter, you can cover the whole thing.
It doesn't at this point, but given the fact that they've got the area in between the panels as well as around it, I think if we did a calculation, I would be happy to ask.
Well, if they're not structures, you don't need to do the calculation. I just thought maybe that needs to be addressed sooner or later.
Yeah, and as you know, there's a few things we got to address in our bylaw and under site plans, including that definition of structure, because as you and I know, we think they're structures.
Because if they're not structured, we don't even do site plan review because they're not adding 1,000 feet of structure or 5 parking spaces. So they don't qualify for site plan review.
Well, in this case, we do, because under the large scale solar PV bylaw, the approval authority for this is site plan review by the planning board. So that's why they're before us.
Okay.
Because the bylaw says.
Thank you.
you have any further questions, Jim?
Nope.
No? John,
Yes, I just want to verify that town council has approved the covenant that's been proposed.
Sorry about that. I'm stuck again. Yes, they have. And as you know, we recently had some pretty intense conversations about covenants. So we want to make sure that we are straight on that. Town council and the Fairgrounds Council, Mr. Nickerson, I believe it's Jeff Nickerson, have had this conversation about the covenant for those. It's in our document and it will be signed prior to any creation of or any building permit for the panels. It's been reviewed by council. Yes, sir.
Okay, second question is there a bond being placed by anyone for any future removal of these structures or
They're not structures.
if they ever need to be removed?
You guys want to talk about the decommissioning bond?
that's what he's asking.
Sure. Yeah, I believe that there is a provision in the large scale ground mount ordinance that we are required to post a bond for that. So we will be doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One, I wonder if you could go back to the site plan that shows the westerly site. I can't see, you're using the same entrances that they've used all along for those parking areas?
When you say westerly site, do you mean west off of Ashumet Road or west the whole other side of the?
The whole other
Project.
side, it's both
Oh.
the north and south sides of the western part of your project.
Yes, for this area, we will be using the existing entrances into the parking facilities for both kind of this northwest area here and for the southwest area as well. You can see that there's an entrance here off of Courier and an entrance here as well. And those are existing entrances.
And they're existing. The other thing I was reading, they're going to be 19 and a few inches up to about 23 inches off the ground, pretty high. And I wonder, I'm familiar with what carports, solar carports look like because of the ones on Thomas Landers Road for the ice skating rink. But I wonder, what will these look like? There seem to be a lot of different ways that solar arrays can look.
That's a great question. So we have a pretty unique solution here. And it's, again, I don't have this in the presentation, but it is in the site plan. So I'm going to scroll through here. Let's see. So, oh, I got to share my screen again. There we go. So I'm looking at the plan we submitted, sheet C6.01, and this sheet does have some details and some cross sections for what our particular carports are going to look like. If I zoom, and because there's a couple different types of arrays, different spacing of the columns, different orientation, there's a couple different types that we're going with. But if I zoom in here, we can start to get a sense of what these might look like. So they're a little bit different than your typical ones. I think typically you would see a foundation and just one single support coming up, and then it would just be a single I-beam underneath. This is more of a framework type system, more of a truss that will support the solar panels that go on the top. What we really like about this option is it can be quicker to install. Basically, you're able to assemble it all on the ground, and then with a single crane pick, you kind of pick a whole array up and you set it in place. That gives us a lot of nice advantages, because obviously we're going to need to take up some parking spaces when we're putting these systems in, but we want to make sure that we're not taking up parking that the fairgrounds need. So by using this system, it kind of allows us some more flexibility. It allows us to install it a little bit faster, so we can, make sure that those that the parking spaces are back in use.
Okay, on the part, I think you're calling it with the RV parking section.
Mm-hmm.
At least on the plans that I have, I couldn't quite make out. The others, you could see where you had planned to have the parking spaces, although they won't be marked on the ground. You were showing that they met the requirement for the 10 by 18 feet. On the RV one, there's quite a slope to that land. So how does that work? People would be parking downhill, and the panels, the solar panels above them, 20 feet or so above them, are going to be sloped also?
Correct. Yeah. And so what I've done here on the screen is I've zoomed in to this RV lot. We took special care with this lot. We took care with the whole project, of course, but special care with this lot because there's existing underground water lines, electric, some sanitary sewer lines here because it is an RV lot where you can come and hook up your RV, hook up your camper, excuse me, and have water, electric, and sewer hookup. So we wanted to make sure that we could keep all those systems in place so that we're not driving a foundation through a line or hitting a line. So we did a detailed field survey to locate where those items are. And you're exactly correct that we designed these systems so that they would slope with that land there. And the RVs can still park there as they currently do.
So the rainwater will be draining off them sort of in two directions. It will flow diagonally down across each of the set of panels. And it looks as if it might, rather than going down to the pervious gravel, it would go off the gravel into the grass and trees. Is that what you're thinking?
Kind of. So what's nice again about this carport system, and I don't know if this comes through in the detail sheet or not. I'm going to zoom back there to see if it does. It probably doesn't, but I'll kind of zoom in. So this is not the panels on top. There are a couple inches, about an inch gap around all the panels. So when it rains, the water will not concentrate on the edge of a panel, on the edge of a series of panels, and kind of waterfall off of that. Like you might see, say if the gutter was clogged on your roof, you would get all the water sheet flowing off your entire roof. It hit the clogged gutter and it kind of waterfall over. Because there's a small gap around each of the individual panels, the water will be able to almost keep its natural path on the ground. Each panel is about, I want to say 3 feet by 6 feet. So if you imagine thousands of these 3 feet by 6 feet panels, but each one has a small gap all the way around it on all four sides. So that the water will still be able to get, you know, through to the ground as it's currently doing.
Okay, and I suppose the engineers looked at that, and the soil erosion people will also. I had a general question. It seems as if the operator, the people who are going to be doing the maintenance and looking after this, once it's up there, Sol Systems is designing it and putting it in, but then the operator is going to be the Barnstable County Agricultural Society. Is that right?
No, so actually Sol Systems will operate and maintain the solar carports. The Agricultural Society will still operate the fairgrounds, of course, and they'll operate the parking lots. But as far as maintenance and operation of the solar system itself, that will be on us.
Okay. That was, those were my only questions. Are there any other questions now? Pam? Oh, you have to unmute yourself. There.
Rennie, what is the life cycle of these panels?
Excellent question. So we have a 20-year lease, is what we're putting forth. The panels actually don't necessarily go bad after a certain time. They get a very small amount less efficient each year. I think it's like 1/4% less efficient each year. But if you think about that compounding, actually 1/4% of 100% is bigger than 1/4% after 10 years or so.
Right.
So the panels don't truly kind of wear out. They'll still work 10 years from now. They'll work just a little bit less than they do now. In the solar industry, it's a very common question because there haven't been a lot of solar projects that have been around for 20 years, and the panels from 20 years ago are not the panels of what they are now. So part of our operations and maintenance program, we do have replacement of the inverters and I believe the battery storage, but not the panels themselves. And again, our lease is for 20 years. At the end of 20 years, I think everyone's hope is kind of this is still a great use for this. You know, that the fairgrounds is still in operation. They still need parking lots, and the panels are still doing well. They're still producing power. We can enhance that lease and have it go further out. Or if everyone says no, you know, we're kind of done with this, then we will take everything off of the site.
Okay, but you're the ones that maintain it.
Correct, we are.
So if there should be any vandalism or any issue and a panel need to be replaced, you're in place for 20 years?
Yes, correct. And what's kind of nice about that is that as the operator and as the long-term owner, we're incentivized to keep the system functioning as good as it possibly can.
Exactly.
Because the more power it produces, quite frankly, the more money we get. So we want to make sure it's clean, all the panels are working, there's no broken parts. everything's great.
I feel the same way about our solar panels.
Excellent.
The cleaner it is, the more we get.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah, one final comment, if I may, Mr. Friedman.
Yes, sir.
The wind load design on these structures.
The final engineering form hasn't been done yet, but that will absolutely be one of the things that's taken into account for it.
What is your experience wind load on some of your other projects?
So, and I'm by no means a wind load expert, but I want to say 120 miles per hour is typical. That's what the systems are typically designed for. There's all kinds of maps and code requirements about, exactly where you are in terms of how close to the coast and things like that about, there's different zones and things like that. And that's absolutely one of the things that gets looked at. We've had some customers that have wanted us to look at 140, 160 miles an hour wind loads when they didn't need it. It just makes the system really expensive to build. I think 120 is kind of what I've seen a lot, but this, I haven't personally investigated what the wind loading for this area is. If it's more, and that's what the code calls for, then that's what we're doing.
Thank you.
any other questions from the members? Do we have any Zoom comments?
No, ma'am, we do not. I've been checking the chat right along, and there have been no comments in the chat.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, I guess we're finished for now.
No, just one more.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Bob.
Yeah, this is going to be set up over a grass field. Have you had experience with solar canopies on grass fields and how it affects the grass field? Will it kill all the grass so that it is just going to be dirt and dust that's going to end up blowing around the neighborhood? Has there been any thought to that?
That's a great question. There has been a lot of thought about that. We were trying to find a way to keep everything under the solar panels as grass. My personally initial thought was you look at a typical ground mount solar project that's not carports and that's all grass and that works well. So why can't we do that here? But once we dug in and did a lot of analysis, and Max and his team at TRC did a lot of analysis on it, we found that really there didn't seem to be a suitable way to do that, which is why we're going with the pervious gravel underneath the canopies themselves. And we're keeping the exterior of it, all the existing drive aisles, as grass, but everything underneath the canopies is going to be gravel.
I think
Thank
I
you.
understood you to say that you're going to take out the dirt. You're going to dig
Yes.
down in the dirt in order to make an area for the gravel and then fill it
Correct.
with, what, 6 inches of gravel, 8 inches?
Yeah, I think it's either 6 or 8. There's a detail. I think it's 6 inches of gravel. Yep. And you're exactly right. We'll take out the top 6 inches of topsoil and we'll put down 6 inches of stone.
Yeah, because you didn't want to create a mud pit.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? No, then I think our step here is to continue this, or there were a few things that needed to be sorted out first. So we'll continue it to the next possible date. When will we get that to Tom?
Well, I guess the question for the applicants, we've got a couple engineering questions, particularly as Cheryl and I talked about. We have this artifact of 25-year storm when we do the water calculations. It's something we are modernizing. So we've got to answer a couple of technical questions for the engineering department. And while I know that people for the most part are pretty well appreciative of the project, and even though the neighbors at the church are fine with that 35-foot setback, I think in order to maintain the integrity of the zoning, we look at scaling those panels back to the V lot down at Courier. The fact that the north part of the site on Ashumet, where we've got where the panels are actually coming within 78 feet of the property line, the actual structures that are holding them up are 100 feet. So I don't really think there's an issue there. But I really think, as much as it pains me and the applicant to say we need to pull a set of those panels back so we're maintaining that 100-foot setback south of Courier, I think that's the best course of action here. I wish we sort of picked up on it in some of our earlier conversations, or we would have had this sort of ironed out prior to. But as we've talked about before, we don't want to be in a position where we like one project, and so we give them a lot of bonus, and we don't look at other projects, so we take a hard line on those sort of things. The zoning is tied to, and this is some of the confusion early on with our applicant. Is it the use or is it the zoning that requires the setback? And while it's a church on the property, the zoning is agricultural. So I really think, much as it pains us all to say, I think we're going to have to remove some of those panels and look at that second plan with those revised panels. Obviously, the same sort of calculus about where that structure is from the setback, I think, would likely apply here. But I think we need to go back and take a look at that. So with that in mind, the question of the applicant is answering engineering's questions, taking a look at the plan. What do you suppose your turnaround time is to come back to the planning board and get something to engineering for them to finalize the review on that?
I could speak to the stormwater analysis if you like, Renee. Okay, for the record, I'm Max Lamson with TRC. We're engineering consultant for Soul Systems and on this project. And so yeah, for the stormwater, we did do 100 years storm for the stormwater model, which is kind of what's required by the DEP, and it's actually a more conservative approach than the 25-year. But we can certainly run the model to show a 25-year storm. It'll pass a 25-year storm because it passed the 100-year storm. But we can share both analyses if that'd be helpful for the board.
I think with our engineering division, they are those I-dotting, T-crossing people like you are, Max. They're engineers. I don't think we've got a burden as proving that it's going to work. We just need to have that calculation. And as you said, we are updating our regulations here. So we hope by next year, we're all on the same page as the rest of the planet with 100-year storm.
Okay, no problem.
Tom, I think, did I mishear you? I thought you were saying that you just said you wanted a change in the coverage of the solar panels and the RV parking area. I thought they were going to formalize an agreement with the church about that setback.
Well, I think the church is fine to have that support, but our zoning requires that 100-foot setback. You can get a waiver or a variance for the setback by going through the Zoning Board of Appeals if there's some particular hardship based on the slope, the shape, or the soil of the land. So I think that the best that they can net is showing that 100-foot setback from and I'm not going to say structure, Jim, I promise, but that heavy steel concrete thing that's in the ground that's holding the panels up. So I think we're just going to have to take a look down there at that section of the plan to see what we've got there is maximizing the solar coverage, but maintaining the integrity of the zone.
Jim, you have to unmute yourself.
A question, Tom. What is the ownership of this? Would the Dover Amendment cover this use? I mean, this is an educational agriculture and a nonprofit. Do they even have to comply with zoning?
Yes, they do. We've had this discussion about what is the educational use. I think in this case, it's not the primary use of the fairgrounds to educate on solar, although I'm sure they will have interpretive things there. But I believe, and we can go back and take a look at that to make sure we're all on the same page with that. But I think that at first blush, it is probably not a Dover Amendment because we usually have those conversations well in advance, as we did with that beautiful building that Hui showed us. And I know how you feel about the Hui building, Jim. as well, but I think that it probably doesn't qualify for the Doberman, but we'll go check with council, check with their council and have that conversation before we come back to the board.
Thank you.
Did we get an answer on a turnaround?
Not yet. It seems from the engineering side, as Max mentioned, TRC can handle those comments. Given that we kind of just found out about this potential setback issue today, I would ask if you can give me a couple days to kind of dig into it a little bit further. Just kind of looking at it, we have a 35-foot setback shown, but across there we are further back than that. So I don't know exactly how far back we are. It doesn't look like we're at the 100 feet, but maybe we can get there with the current layout. Maybe there's other modifications we can make. Maybe there's other things there that we can do. So let me get on this with my team and see what we think is possible. I don't know if we'll be ready to come back in 2 weeks. I certainly hope so, but I don't want to commit to that and kind of miss that deadline. So I'll kind of defer to the board or Tom on what the best approach there
August
is.
11th is our next meeting. After we got a meeting on the 28th and we've got a meeting on August 11th. So are we fairly comfortable continuing this till August 11th, do you think?
That would be fine. Yeah, we could definitely within 4 weeks work this out. Two might be a little tight, but yep, within 4.
So if someone wants to make a motion to continue this to August 11th, we will get to work.
Before we do, we haven't really lifted up from both the town report and your own description of the project, that it really very solidly meets the goals of the Cape Cod Commission and the local comprehensive plan. I mean, this is a very welcome project, and we certainly like it and want to see it go forward as expeditiously as possible. So thank you. And now we'll have a motion to continue till August 11th.
So move.
And a second. Bob, seconds. All in favor. Bob,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Paul. You have to say it. Paul, you need to unmute yourself.
Come on, people, let's get with it.
It's 2020.
I mean, really.
Jim, as he.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. And yes, aye. So we're continued till the 11th. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really clear, and that was really great handling of that screen sharing, some of the smoothest we've seen here. So thanks.
I love to take credit for that, but that was not me. That was however you all set it up on your end. I only had to click a button once. So
I think it's a
thank
program. I think that's what Zoom does.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So well,
Congratulations on
thank you all
clicking
for
the
your
button.
time. Thank you.
A green button. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Now, our next item of business here is from Jeffrey Bright, the site plan review application for a detached accessory apartment located at 32 Walker Street, which we've seen twice before. Nothing new came in. We're going to therefore move this forward. I don't think we had an application to withdraw. So we'll continue it to July 8th. Jim?
Madam Chairman, I think, why are we even hearing this? They haven't brought anything new. I think that we should just dismiss this and let them start over.
Well,
We've kept it on our agenda and there's nothing new.
there is nothing new, and there's certainly, well, Tom, go ahead.
If I may. So they did submit revised plans. They came in over the weekend. And so we let them know the plans have to get here by Thursday. And so they are not ready for tonight's meeting. We did talk to them about the board's desire to withdraw the plan. That was not one of the things they wanted to do. Were we back in the pre-COVID days where we were all sitting in the same room, we would have a deadline for this of July 22nd. So the board would have to either vote to an extension or to deny at this point. But because the tolling isn't in place and the project can go on without a constructive approval, they've requested an extension or a continuance until the April or the August 28th meeting. And it's up to the board to vote that. But that's been their request. I talked to Mr. Bright, or Melinda talked to Mr. Bright today, and we told him there was there need to be at the meeting tonight because there was nothing properly before the board this evening.
Jim, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I want to comment. From day one, this hasn't been ready. The very first thing I saw the plans, we all agreed there's so much missing. They really need to start over. And to keep them on our agenda for five meetings is a total waste of time. That's my opinion, but sounds like we're going to keep them there.
Would anyone else like to comment on that? I have a motion to continue to July 28th. Anyone? Pam?
Yeah, I sort of agree with Jim. How long do you pull something along when you've asked for material that hasn't come in? And then even though they had the information that it needs to be in by the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting, then they submit it during the weekend. Just sort of makes me wonder how serious they are about this site plan. And if perhaps we ought to suggest to them that they start from ground zero and make sure that the elevations, the landscape plan, everything that we've asked for is included.
Lot coverage ratio?
All of that.
I think they're probably aware of what we've asked for. And we're in an unusual situation here in a pandemic. We could give them a little leeway, but even if we weren't, accessory apartments are something that we really like and approve of. Maybe not this one because it really has a lot of problems, but I think that we could be courteous to the citizens here and just continue it till the 28th.
Okay, then I move we continue it to the 28th.
Thank you. Is there a second? Bob seconds it. All in favor? Oh, John?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
And Charlotte? Aye. Thank you. So it's continued. Now we're moving on to a planning board discussion. This is a little bit of something we ought to pay some attention to. And I think it's what, before the meeting began, we had asked Bob, with his terrific speaking voice, if he could please read. The discussion item is authorization to forward the planning board letter to Mass Housing regarding Falmouth Housing Trust 40B application for Lewis Neck Road. In connection with that, Pat Kerfoot has written a letter, and I think before the reading of that, Tom, you might want to tell us what the Board of Selectmen did last night.
So at last night's Board of Selectmen's meeting, the Selectmen did receive emails from several members of the planning board regarding the prominence of the covenant. When I got a draft copy of the letter that Peter Johnson and Staub had drafted from essentially the letter that we provided, the covenant really was not prominently featured in the planning board's concerns. So I had suggested that be included in the letter. There is mention of the covenant, but I don't think it really captures the board's concern about that. So last night, the selectmen voted to send a letter with some additional additions about improving access to the site. But I think that the principal concern of the planning board in having this discussion with Falmouth Housing Trust is, you entered into this A&R plan in order to get a buildable lot, that there will be this covenant for one dwelling unit. And I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to send our letter to make sure that the covenant is featured. In the selectmen's letter, there will also be a memorandum from town council, which I believe I provided. Town council's memorandum essentially says in the third paragraph that there is a covenant on the property, The covenant cannot be overwritten by the Zoning Board of Appeals based on Massachusetts general law. The covenant is not local zoning. It is an agreement between the two parties. And until that covenant is released by those two parties, then you can't build anything more on that lot. So the selectman's letter will go in with Frank Duffy's memo with it. And if the board votes to authorize to us to send our letter, the planning board's letter will go in, and it will also include the covenant and the determination of access in order to make sure that everyone's on the same page with the fact that town council and I both believe there are encumbrances on this site. In their application to the town, to Mass Housing, one of the first questions is, are there any encumbrances in this property? Their answer was no. We believe there is. So I think we're perfectly within our right to send that letter. Noreen Stockman, our zoning administrator, was kind enough to forward to the selectman's office, to my office, which I've forwarded on to Charlotte as well, that the comments from the town can come from any party, any board. So we're not stepping on anyone's toes. We're simply following what the process is and what the law is. And the board's business is the board's business. And if they want to vote authorized to send the letter, then that's perfectly proper.
Could you give it a little bit more context for that? Because in fact, it turns out it's pretty commonplace for Mass Housing to receive several letters from towns. It's not really outside common practice.
Yeah, historically, when I was working at another town that's not Acton for 20 years.
Got to get it in there. I say nothing and you bring it up.
Kingston.
It was Kingston, in fact. So the planning, I would typically write a letter for the planning board and also for the Board of Selectmen. Usually the comments would come from the Board of Selectmen. There'd be a letter from the planning board as well. Oftentimes neighbors might write letters as well. So it's not unusual for those letters to come in. It's great if the letters almost say the exact same thing. And if they say the exact same thing, there's typically no need to send two letters. But I think that knowing the discussions we've had about this over, what is it, 2 years now, that concern about the covenant really needs to be in the forefront of the planning board's concerns, as has been.
Paul, did you want to comment before Bob reads the letter?
Well, let Bob read the letter and I'll comment.
Want to hear the letter first? This letter is signed by Pat Kerfoot, so it's coming from the chair of the planning board. Okay, Bob, to the Mass Housing. Bob, if you are willing, could you do that, please? It's a longish letter, so.
Yeah, just one comment prior to reading the letter is I watched the selectmen's meeting last night, and there was many comments about the fact that their original intention was to put 4 houses on this lot and that everyone knew. And I didn't see anything except the 1 house. So I just wanted to put that out there that I made my decision based on 1 house. So here's the letter. This is from Pat Kerfoot to Michael Busby. So June 18th, 2020, Michael Busby, Mass Housing, 1 Beacon Street, Boston, Mass. 02108, regarding project eligibility, Lewis Neck Road, East Falmouth, Lewis Neck Road. Dear Mr. Busby, at a special meeting of the planning board called June 2nd, 2020, to ensure that comments to the select board were forwarded within the time frame for comment on the Lewis Neck Road project eligibility letter request, the planning board offers the following history of actions. There has been considerable discussion with Falmouth Housing Trust, FHT, throughout 2019 about their efforts to buy parcel C2 and to have the note "not a buildable lot" removed from the A&R plan endorsed by the planning board on August 9th, 2011. Lewis Neck Road is a private dirt road with a 12 foot plus or minus foot of right of way. The FHT lot is approximately 800 feet from the end of the pavement at Irene Ave. After numerous meetings and several votes, the board voted a determination of access for 1 dwelling on November 5th, 2019, with the following determination. The above referenced parcel is adequate to provide for the needs of vehicular traffic to the proposed use of land abutting thereon and serve thereby with the following conditions. 1. Lewis Neck Road from Irene to the subject property, parcel C2, should be cleared of brush for its length from Irene across the frontage of parcel C2 with a width of 18 feet and 13 feet of height. 2. Lewis Neck Road shall have potholes filled in front of the property across the frontage of parcel C2. On November 26, 2019, the planning board voted to endorse an A&R plan removing the not a building lot note subject to a covenant attached, signed by the planning board, Falmouth Housing Trust, and the town manager. One of the clauses of the covenant definitively states that the endorsement of the A&R was specifically contingent on there being a building permit for only one single-family residential structure. Whereas this covenant sets forth the agreement by and between FHT and the town of Falmouth and the Falmouth Planning Board with respect to the Falmouth Planning Board's endorsement of the A&R plan and the issuance of a building permit for one single-family residential structure on parcel C2. This was an unprecedented measure of having a covenant in place prior to endorsing an A&R, removing a note on a parcel due to the conditions, width, and length of Lewis Neck Road to the subject property. It should be noted here that the planning board is strongly in support of affordable housing, but in this instance, the board is concerned with the location of this development due to the length and condition of the unpaved dead-end roadway. The board does not believe the proposal is consistent with the local comprehensive plan, which says locations for future housing options should be determined by available infrastructure, walkability, schools, and services. The board is concerned about increasing traffic, perhaps up to 8 additional vehicles on a narrow unpaved roadway that was discussed and voted on with covenant in place for one single-family residence and is now being proposed for 4 single-family residences. Both the planning board and the town council believe that no further development on the lot is possible unless the town agrees to release the covenant. There is a recent SJC case, 135 Wells Avenue, LLC versus Hack, that appears to indicate that C40B does not give the ZBA authority to change a recorded land use covenant, even if that covenant is held by a municipal entity and creates a restriction that is similar and subject to zoning. The board was also concerned about numerous inaccuracies in FHT's application, including on page 7, site characteristics and development constraints. FHT answers no to the question, are there any easements, rights of way, or other restrictions of record affecting the development of the site? There is a lack of any mention of the covenant. In summary, the board endorsed the approval not required plan only after agreeing to enter into the attached covenant, an agreement between parties for one single-family residential structure. The board and town council agree that the covenant is not subject to be changed unilaterally by any other than the signatories. As such, the planning board on June 2nd, 2020 stated that they would not support the Lewis Neck Road 40B project without the release of the covenant, and the release of the covenant would not be possible with the current road conditions and other expressed concerns regarding infrastructure, walkability, schools, and services. The chair polled the board. 6 of the 7 members concurred that with the existing conditions, they would not support a vote to release the covenant if the FHT requested such. Sincerely, Pat Kerfoot, Chair, Falmouth Planning Board.
Thank you. So our question here is, do we authorize sending it to Mass Housing as is? Paul?
I carefully watched the meeting last night. It went on for about an hour on this item. There's a pretty heavy discussion by the members of the Board of Selectmen. At one point, counsel for the Falmouth Housing Trust suggested that the Board of Selectmen letter does not mention the covenants. Mr. Duffy overruled that and suggested it should be in there. He also thought it may be sent back for local decision rather than them making a decision on it. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. The question before is, do we send a letter to Falmouth Housing, Massachusetts Housing? Since we don't know what the Board of Selectmen finally going to say in their letter, I think we should wait until we see what they say because it may not be necessary to send a second letter. I think the items that came up in the discussion last night were sufficiently covered by the kinds of things we've been concerned with for a long time with this project. So my suggestion would be not to send anything out this time, but let's see what the Board of Selectmen decide to write. And then we'll get a copy of that. And then if it's appropriate, we can comment at that time.
Bob?
We're very
Oh, excuse me.
I disagree. I think we should send it because I too was in attendance of that meeting through FCTV. And I thought they were starting to muddy the waters a little bit. And I think our letter is more specific to what we feel should happen with that. I think the covenant would get lost in everything else that they intend to put into their letter.
Pam? Oh, unmute.
I think that Pat's letter is excellent. I think because the planning board had the authority to begin with, that sending this, either, I don't care whether we wait for the selectmen or not, but I think this should be sent separate under Pat's name and the planning board. I think partly because I think it just encompasses everything we've been dealing with for all this time that the Board of Selectmen has not been involved in. And I think it's coming from the board that has the authority to do what we said we were going to do, which is not approve this. So I fervently agree with Bob that we send this letter on to Mr. Busby at Falmouth, the State Housing Authority.
Jim, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I believe it's very important that we send this letter because we use the term muddying the waters. There's been a lot of comments that have totally, on their application, they totally ignored this. They've never really recognized this covenant. I don't know what their original intent was, but I know what our intent was. And I think we got to state it clear because at other meetings, it's getting misstated. So that for that reason alone, we have to restate it and make it clear.
John?
I have a couple of questions. Has historically anyone but the selectmen sent a letter to Mass Housing for site plan approval?
Tom? Tom, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, in fact, the villages at Brick Kiln, most recently, the planning board sent a separate letter because of the concerns some of the members of the planning board and the planning board in general had about water that might be traveling into the Long Pond Aquifer. So I don't know about prior to my tenure, but during my tenure, we have sent separate letters. Yes, sir.
I don't think I remember seeing that letter. Was that shared with the board?
I know we talked about it, and I wouldn't have sent it without one.
It was discussed with the board. I can remember the discussion. Not all of it in detail, but we had the discussion.
But I don't remember a letter that was going to be sent. I don't remember seeing a letter that was going to be sent.
Not a separate letter. I don't remember that, but can I continue with my questions?
Sure. Go ahead.
So if the board votes to send a letter, the selectmen send their letter, and anybody else sends the letter. Mass Housing approves the site. If they approve the site, the next part of the process is they apply to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And presuming that happens, what does the planning board do at that point?
At that point, the planning board would send comments to the zoning board of appeals as they review the 40B. One of the concerns about having this sort of open issue of the covenant, if the covenant has to be resolved, there are only so many days that you have to approve a 40B. And so if we have this sort of ancillary subject of, are we removing the covenant? Does it require a vote of the selectmen or the town meeting? That adds to the amount of time that the applicant has got to put things in front of the board. And it makes a very complicated matter where the applicant could say, look, we've waited long enough. We don't want to wait any longer. We want you to approve our permit or will appeal to HAC. And as you know, typically, if you appeal something to HAC, it gets approved by the applicant. I think it's important to make sure there's a clean slate when their application comes in. So a very burdened, very busy zoning board of appeals doesn't have one extra additional item to sort through with the covenant.
So just to continue with my train of thought and questions, if it came back, if it goes to the Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals and they were to approve it, would this board appeal that decision?
That would be a decision to make at that time, I would imagine. Does anyone else have a thought on that? Pam?
I think it would depend on what the conditions were that the ZBA approved. I mean, we still have the covenant to deal with. And I don't believe it's the ZBA's purview to dismiss that covenant.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Bob?
What angers me about this is kind of coming in the back door with this, going for one. And I realized that it was a legal maneuver in order to get the not a buildable lot taking off the A&R. And we've seen this with the Dome project where they want to freeze some zoning. So it's something that we've seen before and we all understand. But the way I see it is they told us it was going to be one house. We kind of went against our own principles by allowing them to just cut back the brush and all that. If they had come before us with a 4-house subdivision on that property, it would have been a completely different conversation. And what I don't like to see, and what happens in this town a lot with 40Bs, is the inconsistencies. When I look at my organization, Habitat for Humanity, have 5 acres out in East Falmouth. They were made to put in a 20-foot wide road. They wanted sidewalks. They wanted street lights. They've actually made them put in driveway lights. And the 20-foot road that emptied into a 18-foot wide road with no sidewalks. And this is what they were pushing for. And they had to go through all these waivers in order to just get it so that they didn't have to put the sidewalks and the street lights in. So if someone is going to come before any board that's going to put in a 40B development, they need to follow the same rules and have the same criteria for how you get in there. So if they were going to come before us with subdividing, put 4 units on 1 acre, whereas they cut us down to 2 units per acre on a 5-acre piece of property, I want to see people treated equally. So this should be a 20-foot wide paved road with sidewalks and street lights if they want to put a 4-unit subdivision on a 1-acre parcel, on an 800-foot long driveway, essentially. So that's my gripe with this, is the way they've gone about doing this. I don't think it's fair. I think it's time this town started treating people fairly and equally, and this doesn't do that.
It would be good if we kept track of these instances so that as we're making our decisions, we can say, well, wait a sec, in order to be consistent, this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
That'd be good to know. Jim, did you want to say something? You have to unmute yourself.
I'm all set. I agree with everything Bob said. Took all
Yes.
the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, I'm glad he stated it so strongly. John?
I only want to say one more time, there's a reason why 40B developments are not approved by planning boards. I've said it before, and that's why it goes to the zoning board of appeals, because the planning board has criteria that they don't want to change.
It's not in all towns, though.
And it's not always so. I don't think that we really need to just accept that criticism. This has a lot of problems with that road that we discussed at great length, and what they could
Right.
do and how they could work with the neighbors, and because we wanted it to work in some way. So I don't accept the fact that we are rigid and inflexible. We've been flexible in other instances. I think we might be ready to make a decision. Are there any further comments? Paul?
Yeah, the letter that Bob read, dated, I think, June 18th, was addressed to Mass Housing and signed by the chair of the Falmouth Planning Board. Was that sent to Mass Housing? Or was just that provided for the Board of Selectmen?
Oh, no. This is that we're discussing now whether to send it. It
Right.
hasn't gone anywhere yet. Tom?
I thought it was sent already, no?
So our letter to Mass Housing is essentially the letter that we sent to the Board of Selectmen.
That's what I thought.
It was copied to Falmouth Housing Trust. This particular letter is also copied to Falmouth Housing Trust and the Falmouth Select Board. So our original letter, it's essentially the same letter we sent to the selectmen and the same letter that was copied to Falmouth Housing Trust. It has not been sent to Mass Housing.
And then it's appropriate we do so.
Tom, I have a question for you. What's the time frame for sending letters to Mass Housing? When does that period close? You recall?
About 30 days ago. But due to COVID and things like that, it's been extended. And in fact, Mass Housing, at my request and at the zoning administrator's, I think it's the zoning administrator's request, because I was out when this came in, has been extended to the end of the week. So comments are due to Mass Housing by Friday.
John?
So are we voting to send Pat's letter or a separate letter that I haven't heard?
The one you just heard from Pat.
Pat's letter that Bob wrote, which is separate from what the selectmen are sending.
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to make a decision? Paul?
Yeah, just one final comment. Understanding that the Butter has contacted all the various people on that street, now beginning to improve that roadway. And they've paid an assessment to improve that road, widen it and pave it. I don't know the status of the Falmouth Housing Trust in that negotiation. They have not been a party to that as far as I know. But all the others put money in to try to improve that roadway. And the area eventually would be Falmouth Housing, so they may come back for that time.
Well, that would be nice, but we make our decisions based on the as-is situation. Pam, did you want to comment?
Yeah, my last comment is just keep in mind that if a family were to move into that home as an affordable housing unit, they would therefore be responsible for the upkeep of that roadway. And I think we have to be very, very careful about what we commit for people who are under the affordable housing purview.
Good
Not
point.
sure I articulated that right.
No, we got it. It would cost them money. Now are we ready to make a decision?
Yes.
Okay. First, we need a motion.
I move that we send the letter under Pat's signature to Mass Housing.
Second,
John Drewley, are you in favor?
No,
Jim?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes,
Bob?
yes.
Pam?
Yes.
And Charlotte, yes. So, thank you. I think those were all really good comments. It's hard to turn down an affordable housing thing, but some of them make it easier. Future agendas and pending applications. Tom, you had a list there.
I do what I'm looking for.
Oh, do you want us to look also?
Yes, if you would like, while we're looking for that, and maybe Michaela can.
I've got it right here. I'm not
Okay,
sure
great.
I'm gonna screen share correctly.
Go for it.
Oh, well, let's try it out and see. This isn't going very well.
It's a lot to run a meeting and screen share and do all those other good things.
Well, it's certainly failing. I can't do it. I'll read it. For July 28th, we have Borrego Solar SPR continued. We have WH Partners, DEF, I've forgotten what that stands for, continued.
Woods Hole,
Donardo. Hmm?
that's the Woods Hole definitive plan.
Oh, definitive plan, thank you. Oh, there we go. Donardo, SPR 9 Hitching Post Lane continued, and Murray, a new project. And others might come in. I think we can go back to not sharing. Okay. That's for the future agenda items for applications. Are there any announcements? Anyone have anything? Jim? Oh,
The request for future announcements. I'd like to see the Davis Straits get back on our agenda. We used to, when I was chairman, I had it on the agenda all the time. And I know for various reasons it's been taken off, but there's no reason why we can't be making progress on this now and having some discussions and moving it forward.
okay. Well, we're going to get to future agenda items pretty soon.
Oh, I
but
thought that's still what this was. We thought we were discussing, I thought you said future agenda, excuse me.
Nope, sorry. We're still on announcements. We have to do correspondence first. Tom, you have an announcement?
No, if I may, just to Jim's point, we talked with Jeremy Lake with Union Studios last week. I got an email from Jeff Davis, who's one of the folks on the contract with Union Studios. And we're prepared to put together a presentation for the 28th if we can get it all together with those folks. And I would venture to say that on either August 11th or our third Tuesday meeting in August, that we might have that entire meeting dedicated to Union Studios in Davis Straits. That would be the August 18th meeting.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
That's the conversation we've been having with those folks.
Okay, so I take it there are no announcements. No one has any to make. Then let's do our correspondence, and then we will get to future agenda items. In correspondence, we've received from David Epstein at 15 Fern Lane, further information about the difficulty encountered in accessing our Zoom meetings. Not that he had, because he didn't try to attend apparently, but that another individual who wished to attend couldn't quite do it. So we make note of that. Then we had correspondence that we're not going to go through but Tom is going to speak to on 435 Palmer Avenue. You remember Pam asked a question about the construction there at Hospital Corner, Palmer Ave and Jones Road, where the gas station was, the station building was torn down, and they're doing something there. So this is what's happened since about that, and Tom's going to speak to that.
Yes, if I may. So 435 Palmer Avenue is the tear down of the gas station and the replacing with a gas station and a new convenience store. Under our site plan bylaw as it currently exists, that didn't come before the planning board because the change in square footage was less than 1,000 square feet. So it didn't come to the planning board, and even though the design was before the design review committee, and I have to say this was several years back, it was appealed, it was in court, and when it came back to the town for an administrative approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals, Noreen asked me about whether it needed site plan review, and I said, well, certainly it does need at least design review. Had a conversation with Bob Ament, who made a very good point that back when this was approved by the town, design review was by the design review committee since dissolved, and their recommendation was advisory. So the design review back in the day was advisory. The change in square footage wasn't enough to trip the threshold for site plan review, which makes this project a perfect poster child for why we need to improve our site plan review bylaw, which we hope to bring to town meeting in November. Michaela and I have been looking at various models, working with Bob Mitchell on some changes to our site plan bylaw to make sure that these things come to the board, because essentially they're demolishing an entire site and they're rebuilding it with no additional review.
Jim, did you wish to comment?
Absolutely. I'm glad this was brought up because I normally wouldn't say this, but the reason why we got rid of the design review is because we found out they were violating the open meeting law because they weren't taking minutes. So every single thing they did is a violation of open meeting law and is subject to appeal. And now we're going to put that on record right now, that this is now subject to appeal because that meeting was in violation of open meeting law. They cannot produce minutes. They didn't take any, it's just a total violation. And that's why we took it back. So to use that as a support doesn't fly for me.
I didn't know that.
Well, you weren't on the board then, but Bob certainly remembers. He and I got French fried by Attorney Amet for going to a design review committee. And he actually tried to have us not even speak about what they were talking about because we're out of order. But then our town planner, then I asked at a meeting, well, can we see the minutes of their meeting? And they had to reveal that they didn't take minutes and they weren't recorded. And then we found out that every single thing they did was in violation of open meeting law. So if this group wants to go forward based on that foundation, that's really fine with me.
And for the record, that was the previous town planner, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, I messed up enough stuff. I just wanted to make sure.
No, what happened was when we pointed out, it actually came all the way back to the CVS meeting because Bob and I were getting criticized for talking about being out of order and talking about design on a building. And I'm not going to mention their names, but the applicant's attorney got up and said, well, it's already been approved by the design review committee. And then I asked, can we see a copy of their minutes? And she said publicly they didn't take them. And our previous town planner turned 3 shades of red and quickly got rid of the design review committee because everything they did is subject to appeal.
Wow, Pam.
So what's very sad to me is there were some major issues with the queuing of the cars to get into the gas station during very high traffic times.
Mhm.
And I know that the retaining wall was damaged by whoever's doing this construction that belongs to the Cape Cod Bagel. And, and I know we can't do anything about the effect of one business on another, but it could have a very deleterious effect on Cape Cod Bagel. But my main concern is the traffic. When you look at that corner of Jones Road and Palmer Ave, it's a horrible area to get out of. And you're only supposed to go in one direction. That's meaningless because people go take a left turn out of there anyway. But I'm really concerned about the safety, and I'm very surprised that who would it be? The building commissioner or the engineering department didn't make them push the pumps, the gas pumps, back much further so that cars would not queue up there. So I think we lost an opportunity to make some positive changes there.
Tom, did you want to speak?
Yes, so the reason why we're talking about this being reviewed by the design review committee is because this approval, and I don't think I quite have it in front of me right now, 2016. So 2016, this was a special permit that was issued, and the folks at Cape Cod Bagel did actually appeal it, and that's why it's held up in court. And in court, as I understand it, I'm working from memory here, Their appeal was denied based on the fact that I think they said they didn't have standing, which seemed a bit unusual for a direct abutter. But Cape Cod Bagel did appeal it. Their appeal was denied, and that allowed the project to move forward as it's under construction right now.
What a shame. That's all I have to say.
Any other remarks following up on that letter? Okay, the final correspondence that we have, I would like to read. It's from Corey Pacheco, whom we all know. And this is his letter. Corey Pacheco, 597 County Street, New Bedford, Mass. 02740. He wrote it on July 7th, 2020, and he addressed it to Tom. And of course, it was forwarded to the planning board. Dear Tom, it's with regret that I'm writing to inform you of my decision to resign as your assistant town planner for the town of Falmouth, effective July 7th, 2020. The town's decision to place me on Families First Coronavirus Response Act and expanded family medical leave from April 10th to July 3rd, 2020, without considering a work from home arrangement until July 2nd, 2020, nearly 12 weeks later, coupled with a 40% reduction in salary, has put my family in a difficult situation. Given the circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic and the cancellation of school and activities related to childcare, this situation has forced me to consider alternative arrangements. I've enjoyed working for the town and serving the citizens of Falmouth. I'm proud of the work I've done in Falmouth and with the Falmouth Planning Board, the Falmouth Historical Commission, and the Poorhouse Edward Marks Building Advisory Committee. I will cherish the relationships I've made working with town staff and citizens who care deeply about their town. If I can be of any assistance during the time it will take to fill the position, please do not hesitate to ask. Best of luck in the future. Best regards, Corey Pacheco. And what I'm hoping is that we would all agree to prepare and give to Corey a commendation for his work for the town for as long as he's been here. We've all worked for him and worked with him and benefited from it. And I think we would want to commend him. Is there any comment on that? Pam?
I think we've lost an incredible employee. And I think it could have been avoided with a work from home, just like any number of other people have been able to do. And we've lost an intelligent, caring, wonderful man who could have gone places here in Falmouth and continued to do the work that he was doing. And I feel very, very badly about that.
Yeah, I agree.
I
John?
agree also.
Jim, yes?
Agreed.
Well, Paul, we'll draft something up and we can all figure out how we can get it signed and give it in the name of the Falmouth Planning Board to Corey. Paul, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention one other thing. I think Corey has worked very hard for the planning department, also for the historical commission. He's been involved in a number of areas, and every time I had a conversation with him, he'd been very helpful, very generous, and a very gentleman approach to everything. I agree, it is a loss to the town that he is no longer with us.
Well, I think it's a real loss to our board. He was a terrific support to the board. And when I was on the
Absolutely.
board and I knew virtually nothing, he answered all my questions patiently. He gave background for his answers. They weren't one word yes or no's. He just really took his time to help me acclimate to board work. And I will miss him. I'm sorry that this has happened. And I agree with Pam. These must be very funny personnel policies that do not follow what I thought was what was being encouraged for private sector and for government, that people would be encouraged to work from home because it
Right.
would keep them and their families safe and it would keep the public safe. So I don't really understand the provisions that he talks about, but I think that they're I wonder to how many other town employees they applied and similarly disadvantaged. It's a loss to the town. So we'll prepare a commendation and go forward with that. Thank you. I mean, now, future agenda items. Davis Straits. Jim?
Well, before David Straits, I want to mention one other thing. I'd like to actually have a conversation. There's several properties around our town that have been left in atrocious conditions for many, many years. And
Yes.
I don't know if we have a bylaw or what we can. I won't mention them now, but if you really think about it, there's one on North Main Street, there's one on Main Street, there's one on Dillingham Ave that have been really left in a terrible state for a long time. And I don't know if maybe we can't do anything about it, but we should start complaining about it anyways.
Well, there's one on Route 151 at the corner of 151 and 28.
Yep.
Been there for years. You know, they tore down the building on Dillingham. The old
Right.
tavern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Nimrod.
So what do you want to call that? Atrocious buildings?
Oh, there's another one on North Main Street. There's another one on Main Street I guess it's kind of caught up between ping pong between the ZBA and the planning board. But for the 2 years it's been there on our main road across from our brand new rec center, it's terrible. Maybe I don't know. Do we have a standing to say anything? I don't know, but I'd like to discuss it.
I would actually like to hear from the town council on that. What's our recourse? Because there's the atrocious buildings, and then there are buildings that they're not abiding by parking and landscaping requirements at all, and they leave a mud field for years.
Right.
John? Yeah, John?
Maybe a multifamily bylaw would incentivize the property owners to spruce up their property.
Bingo.
Shall we put multifamily planning bylaw on our list?
Yes.
Yes.
I also would like to add tax taking for a discussion.
Well, are there any other additions coming from the board? This kind of brings us to our request to have a discussion meeting where our time and patience and, brain width isn't taken up with applications, but we can talk about our longer term projects. Tom, are you thinking about scheduling those? Extra work for yourself?
Well, as noted, we are short-staffed and will be for the time being, but certainly for our third August meeting, I think we want to slot Davis Straits and Union Studios for that meeting. So perhaps our September meeting, a bit more of that, and hopefully where are we at July? I don't know that we'll have a new staff member on by the middle of September, considering the hiring process and then having to give notice. But we are, based on Corey's resignation, very much bare bones, and I'm doing what I can as much as I can. So I'll do the best that I can, but I think we're probably perhaps October, maybe before we, sort of somebody staffed up to be, helpful. So I hope brings eternal.
Well, I think for several of the things that we're mentioning, the board needs time, official time on the clock, public, open to the public to discuss items. And I don't know that it would take staff preparation time or follow-up time for the board to have the time to learn its own mind. That's really what we're seeking right now.
I think you're absolutely correct.
Well, let's see what we can do. But I have to be just very realistic about just what sort of free board we've got to really get that information to the board. Because while your opinions are all valued and helpful, the things that staff brings to the table, the law, the options, and things like that. We always want to be prepared for the meetings and give the board information and answer the board's questions. And it's just going to take a while till we've got those sort of bodies, but I'll do what I can as I have to keep moving forward the mission.
I appreciate your willingness to move it forward. Thank you. Any other future agenda items? Shall we adjourn?
So move.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 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 aye. We're adjourned.
aye.
That's it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.